Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. Founders, entrepreneurs, and individual professionals, we all need to keep track of ideas that are helping create our today and tomorrow. Bits About Books will strive to find those books and speak to their authors, go behind the scenes and understand what inspired the authors to write the books that they did and how they went about doing so. Through our conversations, we hope to gain insights that will help us to get the most out of our efforts. I'm your host Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitchlink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform where our mission is to make buying easy. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. It means a lot to hear from you. Today we have with us Abhijit Bhaduri, and we will speak about his new bestseller, Dreamers and Unicorns: How Leadership, Talent and Culture Are the New Growth Drivers.
We've always looked at unions, trade unions, as something which is for the blue collar workforce. That they sort of negotiate the salary, they will negotiate the benefits, then they will negotiate vacation days, and then they will say that workplace must have a water cooler there. It's a sort of elementary hygiene, etc. And then there came technology, where this entire thing got turned on its head, and you said the food is free, your laundry is free, you don't really need to do this, and you're paid absurd amounts of money. And therefore the belief was that this is a sort of the whitest of the white collar workforce. And you look at what's happening today with the Google workers getting unionized. And so you kind of say that, oh, all right, I mean, what are they really fighting for? Because they are well paid, they have all these benefits, unlimited vacation. What could they be negotiating? And you see the kind of things that they are looking at. They are looking at equity. They are looking at justice. They are looking at, the disproportionate kind of payments made to people who have been accused of, let's say, harassment cases, etc. I mean, there are a whole lot of things. We are now sort of writing about it because of the novelty factor, because we think, why should somebody from Google go and form a union, right? But this is going to be the norm.
Abhijit Bhaduri is the founder and CEO of Abhijit Bhaduri Associates. He is a strategic advisor to business leaders and organizations in transition, executive coach to leaders on building a culture that attracts talent necessary to drive growth, rated among the top 10 learning experts globally. His clients range from Fortune 100 companies to startups and large Indian organizations. LinkedIn Top Voice 2020, brand evangelist for Society for Human Resources Management, influencer for Adobe, advisor to People Strong. Abhijit was the former Chief Learning Officer for Wipro, alumnus of Microsoft, PepsiCo, Colgate and Tata Steel. Beside this one, he authored 2 best-selling books, The Digital Tsunami and Don't Hire the Best, How to Hire for Culture Fit. Now, on to this insightful episode with Abhijit Bhaduri. Abhijit, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm delighted to have you here. It has been a long time since we last spoke in 2019 about Talent-Wise, and that was a great chat. Got great response, and I was really looking forward to speaking to you about your new book. So tell me, how did this idea that you need to sort of talk about this fundamental shift that is happening in terms of what really spurs growth in corporations in this new changed world. When did this sort of come about as a thought, and how did that finally become the book?
Thank you, Shubhanjan. So a couple of things happened. 4 years back, I wrote a book called The Digital Tsunami. And that was really done with the idea of talking about some of the things that I had observed, and these were shifts that I had seen during my 7 years at Wipro, looking at, all the different verticals that we had, from manufacturing, telecom, retail, healthcare, all those, finance, when you look at it, you kind of really see that there were some shifts which were happening because of this technology. And that was the first book. It was more about saying that this is happening. Um, and then when I started to do my own thing, I launched my own firm in 2016. And what happened was I spoke to a number of my clients, and all of them said that we read the book, but what do we do about it? How do we address this issue? And I found that most people, whether it is the startup or it is the unicorns or any of these people, they all understand how to address things which have been constant in the previous world also, like, for example, product market fit, raising capital. These were things, all the tangible things, people really understand and get it, that, okay, we need to do this. I think what happens is a lot of founders have been groomed in that model, which says that if you can't measure it, it's useless. Stop doing it. And, as somebody in human resources, I've always had that response. You want to run a training program. What's the ROI? Why are we doing this? And you have to find measures that, so you sort of help people do something on their leadership skills. Immediately somebody will say, what is the ROI on that? And many of these things are actually irrelevant questions, because, what's the ROI of being truthful? What is the ROI of giving people the right to vote? What is the ROI? I mean, there are a whole lot of things that, and I realized that it was a kind of a conditioning that had been done and making us blind to all the things that were creating value. So I noticed that the value of the firms was shifting. The things that create value were the intangible things, whether it was intellectual property, patents, talent strategies, the leadership, culture. This had always been there, but I suddenly found that the contribution to value creation had changed. And then I saw a lot of research. I mean, McKinsey talks about 80% of the firm's value is really in the intangibles. Colin Myers' book, Prosperity, actually talks about 85% of the firm's value today is intangibles. And I said, if that's the thing, why are people still looking at the old world and operating as if nothing has happened? So that's a very long answer to your question.
I'm feeling that you wrote this book for the new crop of companies. You're possibly not targeting the leadership of a Wipro or a Tata to read this book and sort of start valuing or start rethinking their process. I'm just.
No, it isn't. It's actually fairly universal. I mean, because if you really look at, there are 4 or 5 shifts that I talk about. I mean, one is that, if you can't go digital and if you can't operate in a fully remote scenario, I don't think you will be able to survive. And this is not just because of the work from home kind of a scenario, but whether it's customer, whether it is the employee, everybody has to be able to really operate. Online and offline is an artificial boundary. In as much as B2B, B2C, all those are artificial boundaries that have been created, which are obsolete now. The second thing is that, people have to manage polarities. That is the second shift. The polarity is that, whether you think about it from the point of view of online to offline or full-time versus freelancers, those kind of combinations. Looking at how much do you sort of focus on innovation versus how do you sort of grow the existing product. These are polarities that the leaders have to really grapple with. The third is what we talked about. Intangibles are really creating bulk of the value. The fourth thing that I sort of observed was that we are going to see the rise of emotions in the workplace. And we can talk about this in far greater detail. And the final fifth one is that these shifts are going to be perpetual. I mean, so it's no longer going to be that whole model where, typically, if you remember, Microsoft would say, okay, we have Windows 95, then we have Windows 98, then 2000. So it was 3-5 years before, some kind of a tangible shift happened. Now, if you look at the average app, I mean, every 2 weeks, you find that there's a need because some hardware has changed, some software has changed, some security features have changed, some new features have been added. The customer wants something else. So this perpetual shift is going to become a part of it. So these were the 5 shifts that I actually talked about, which applies to everybody, regardless of Tata's or the new
Fair
age
enough.
company.
Fair enough. The point I was actually sort of coming to was that what we are seeing as going remote is pretty much what started off as offshore manufacturing, right? So we
Yes.
are trying to find this whole phenomena of globalization, which manifested itself first. Original globalization was when resources were being taken from other parts of the world to different parts of the world. We'll not get there. It's 200 years history, right? That'll be too far back.
That's right.
More recently, it's what you saw, the growth of China or growth of the East in terms of cheap labor and so on. So what we are seeing now is sort of a continuum of that, which is now come and actually squarely focused on human capital. I mean, you're from the software industry. I mean, the discussion was that's possibly the only industry where your entire asset base walks out of your office every night and comes back the next morning, and you need to ensure that they do, right? So that thought process was already there. However, it is taking a completely different shift with the rise of the gig economy. In fact, one of the chapters you are talking of top talent will not be on your payroll. We'll get
That's
there.
right.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
But
sure.
but when this question came to you after your first book, that how do we implement and how do we tackle this? What is this digital shift? Is what you explained in the previous book, and now you want readers are saying, "Hey, I understand the shift, but what do I do?" So
Right.
how did that sort of morph into the idea of this new book, and how did you go about structuring it?
Oh, that's a lovely question. After I wrote the book, I was really focusing on how human resources as a function has to shift, because that's the core of what I've done for all my life. And I found that I wanted to look at how technology is going to change the way HR operates. Yeah, so HR we've always said that, oh, it's all about the human touch and all of that. I mean, then you also realize that technology allows you to do more of that, and takes away all the transaction. But for a very long time, this has been one of the functions which has seen the least amount of automation and least amount of innovation in that space. Also, even if you think about a lot of the HR work, they're still using methods which are no different from what would have been done, let us say, in 1920. It's just that you've got a little more sophisticated, that you now use a spreadsheet to track the people, or you have a SaaS program which is doing it. But if you really look at it, the opportunity to do, for example, companies have for years together invested in doing research on the consumer or the customer. You track the customer satisfaction, you track the consumer satisfaction with your goods. I mean, even somebody who sells a 5 rupee potato chip packet, and I worked in that industry. So you kind of obsess about, did they like this flavor? Did they want this? Do they like the color of this? I mean, here is your entire employee base, and you do nothing to understand what matters to them. And then we worry about all the byproducts. We worry about attrition. And then we have things which are, which is called employee engagement, which again is something that I think we are really looking at it in an extremely superficial manner, which is that, I wish you on your birthday, and I think you are now going to be amazingly engaged in the workplace. I mean, what a childish assumption is that? So I think the opportunity, people, when they come to the workplace, they want to have a certain amount of dignity. They want to understand, that it's a fair workplace. They want to know that if I work with you as my manager, my skills are going to be growing, and that, I become more prized in the workplace. And the whole model is that, okay, if we train the guy, he's going to run away. So why train the guy? And it is just such a regressive thought process, because
Absolutely.
and it's really like saying, if my kid is going to become educated, he's probably going to go away and work in some other part of the world. So let me keep the kid illiterate. I mean, yes, this is a ridiculous extension of the same logic, but it is. So I think the opportunity to do research, on employees, the opportunity to actually really start to understand what do they care about, how do we create this whole. I will take a very simple example. Even today, when you look at, and I work as a freelancer, and I have a small little firm with a few people. This firm, when you go to a company, who is the department that deals with the freelancers? It's the purchase department. They buy staplers, they buy chair tables, and they buy freelance talent. I mean, so, and then so when people say people are my most important resources, I laugh. Because most often, when you want to really figure out what is the thing that organizations grapple with the most, all you need to do is to look at that, that statement that they put on each of those things. That's really what they grapple with. So, and it's always been the case, because you say it with the idea of telling yourself, okay, that's my vision, that's where I want to go. But that's really what they grapple with. So the company which makes a big deal out of globalization and teamwork actually grapples with that. And I have worked in places which have had that as the slogan, and they really grapple with it. So I understand that. But understanding something is not good enough. You have to be able to do something about it. So that was my effort. So I wanted to write about human resources. So the book was originally called How to HR. That was the title. And so I wrote that, and then I kind of said that, because it's not good enough to just take HR out of that entire workplace scenario, but you need to look at the entire thing, which is when I sort of came up with this whole equilibrium between work, worker, and workplaces, and whenever that shifts, any one of these things shifts and the other two have to shift. Otherwise, it will never, settle down. So that was the second phase. So the book moved beyond HR into work, worker, workplace. And then I kind of said that this is not the same for, let's say, a startup versus, say, the $1 trillion company. It's different. And the growth patterns are different. And that was where it was about understanding these 5 shifts. And that was really what I did. And I got to do that at the time of... when I did the, so during the pandemic, I was locked up and I had to revisit my book because it was supposed to be published, in the month of January 2020. I submitted the book and it was supposed to be published. And then this lockdown happened and I thought, this is a good time because everything was shut down. I said, let me rethink about the script. And when I started to see all those changes of people working from home and the grappling of, the organizations and the migrant labor crisis and all those things, and I said, wow, I mean, this is a different world that is coming up. And so I sort of really shred the manuscript, so to say. And I said, I think it's going to be a month or two before, this lockdown ends and this pandemic gets sorted out. So in this next 2 months, let me start to rethink the structure of the book. So I really started to do that. And that was the origin of, Dreamers and Unicorns. So I started to redo the entire thing. And at some point of time, I said, I'm not going to make cosmetic changes. I'll rewrite. So it got rewritten.
Got it. So obviously there are few very fundamental focus areas in the book, as I can see. Let's start with this 5 shifts. Let's go into it a little more in detail. How did you synthesize what you are seeing into these, and how do you think that's going to impact the future of work?
Yeah, so during the last 4 years where I've been consulting with a range of companies, I've had an opportunity to, look at this entire range of companies, starting with, let's say, the real startup world, living in Bangalore, That's one of the biggest advantages you have, that you get to work with them. You get to work with the VCs. You get to work with, the unicorns which are there. And then you also get a chance to work with the more established market shapers. They are all there in Bangalore. You kind of see all of it. And then, there is this, apart from these three, you also see a whole range of other companies also, the established incumbents in the word. A lot of people say that's not a nice word anymore. So, yeah, I mean, possibly. So, but I got a chance to look at all of them, and I started to see that these are recurring patterns. And, for example, when you talk about the empty maps, one of the things that is a common human tendency is that we tend to look at the present scenario in terms of the past. I mean, for example, if you're trying to learn a new language and, let's say you do not speak, Tamil, and when somebody says Tanir, so in your mind, you have an automatic tendency to say, okay, that's water. Oh, or if you are a Bengali speaking person, you say jol. Acha, okay, so that's jol. It happens when you do the language translation. But when you really start to ask people who teach you languages, they will tell you that the first thing you have to do is to stop translation. You have to look at it as an independent way, because otherwise you don't pick up the accent, you don't pick up the nuances, you don't pick up any of those things. I also think it happens in the workplace because, what happens is people, they get hired from different places. So, I've seen that if it's a hospitality industry, there is some of the senior leader who's been hired from, let us say, the Tata Group of Hotels is building a Tata Group of Hotel culture. Somebody who's brought in from the Oberois is building the Oberoi culture. So you see the organization becoming a hodgepodge of all of this. So I think the best thing to sort of really look at is, I use the word empty maps, because as long as the maps, when they were being constructed, for a long time we used to fill in imaginary places and animals in those maps because we didn't like the idea that this is something we didn't know. But until you really so empty maps is really a kind of a metaphor one is using. And so really saying that, you have to take the stance that you don't know this. How would you approach it? With the curiosity of a child. I mean, who doesn't understand what it is? Which is why you see today that when very often the adults will sort of look at their own kids and say, my kid, when they got hold of the phone, they were able to expand the picture by just, using that gesture. How did they do it? That's because the kid is not, unlike the adult, is not conditioned to think that the picture can be only looked at in a certain way. Because in your mind, you believe that you've seen the printed picture in the album, and you cannot imagine that it can be expanded, but the kid doesn't have any such limitation. They are able to do it. So I think the empty maps is that novice mindset. So empty maps is far more evocative, and so I sort of use that phrase.
It's time for a short break. Abhijit started this session talking about the 5 shifts that he focuses on. These include being boundaryless, managing emotions at work, and being in perpetual beta. I asked him to focus on one in particular, that of managing emotions at work. Stay with us.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. As we went into the break, I asked Abhijit to elaborate on the shift happening around managing emotions at work. I drew his attention to the fact that this is not only about understanding employees, but the same attitude permeates to the teams and influences our thoughts about our customers. Let's listen to Abhijit as he walks us through his thoughts. Let's now then talk about the shifts that you started off talking, and we said that we'll elaborate on it a little more. We talk about employees. I mean, I'm just trying to draw a parallel that we say that employees are important, yet all we want to do is wish them, send them a happy birthday card and so on. And by the way, it's not only restricted to employees. When you are looking at B2B, see, consumer research and consumer marketing, B2C is in a space. But when I sort of spend a lot of time with B2B marketeers, you'll be surprised how much of this thought that if I send a birthday card to my prospect, he will think I'm really close to him, manifests itself. It's sort of the same psychology carries through, that I will be able to earn trust by doing very little.
Yeah.
So coming back, would you like to elaborate a little more on emotions at work? Because that's the point where we left it last time.
Sure. When you think about, a traditional model of workplace has been that when you come into the office, it's all about logic, and you leave your emotions behind. So if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling happy, if you have got a problem at home, I don't want to know about it. You please do your work and sort of move back. So it's a real hangover from that early days of automation, where we said that the human being is sort of mass producing stuff, and it's a faceless human being who's doing that work. You are substitutable. So whether you are there or the next worker is there, it really doesn't matter. We've slowly, and you talked about that example where in technology, your assets walk out every evening. The first time I heard that phrase was when I, joined an advertising agency. And that is also where they say that, your assets walk out every evening because, really, you take out all the creative guys who are there. I mean, then, it's not substitutable. Yeah. So when you look at that whole phrase, there are many places where this has been there. But it's just the way that we have looked at the mindset of mass production has come into the world, which is now is very different. Again, it's a case of a legacy hangover. I think when you look at, and there are many things, therefore, which are jolting the people and they're getting surprised. I mean, for a very immediate example of this, we've always looked at unions, trade unions, as something which is for the blue collar workforce, that, they sort of negotiate the salary, they will negotiate the benefits, then they will negotiate vacation days, and then they will say, that workplace must have a water cooler there. It's a sort of elementary hygiene, etc. And then, there came technology, where this entire thing got turned on its head, and you said, the food is free, your laundry is free, you don't really need to do this, and you're paid absurd amounts of money. And therefore, the belief was that this is a sort of the whitest of the white collar workforce. And you look at what's happening today with the Google workers getting unionized. And so you kind of say that, oh, all right, I mean, what are they really fighting for? Because they are well paid, they have all these benefits, unlimited vacation. What could they be negotiating? And you see the kind of things that they are looking at. They are looking at equity. They are looking at justice. They are looking at, the disproportionate kind of payments made to people who have been accused of, let's say, harassment cases, etc. I mean, there are a whole lot of things. Now, they are worried about the kind of projects that, the employer is going to do. And you think about it, this is, we are now sort of writing about it because of the novelty factor, because we think, why should somebody from Google go and form a union, right? But this is going to be the norm. And so you will suddenly find a whole lot of people catching up because, let's say, what prevents it from happening, say, with the startups, which is what I'm writing about in my next newsletter. I'm saying that what happens if this happens to you? that, okay, all right. And, the Google right now, workers union, the Google workers union is not a majority union. It's less than 50%. There's, 700 people as we speak today. But the fact is, in 2 weeks, it has gone from, some 150 or whatever, 300 to 700. So you can just simply do the math in your head and say, how long is it going to take? And if it is happening there, it's going to happen to Apple, it's going to happen to Amazon, it's going to happen to everybody else, because the notions of understanding emotions in the workplace is a foreign concept for most leaders, because we've never learned to address emotions, which is why the example that you gave, that when in B2B, when they say, if I send the guy a happy birthday thing, he will think I'm his bosom buddy. It is a very sort of underformed idea of what builds trust. And it's, and then you look at the whole lot of changes that have happened. Let's say the workplace. In the workplace, you say you cannot use WhatsApp to communicate. You cannot use this app to do this. You cannot. These are the officially sanctioned apps. Look at what the employee is doing outside. So they say, okay, you know what? You are my colleague. You and I are going to form a WhatsApp group. We are going to self-communicate. You have no clue what is going on in that WhatsApp group because you are not a part of it. So I think that model of, too many divisions, and the workplace has been treated like a aquarium. It is an aquarium where the fishes are swimming inside. You've created some artificial plants and, some seaside view, and the fish are happy. This is going to be a time when that aquarium is part of the ocean. And so, good and bad is going to come from that. So this is a new world the leaders will have to navigate.
Yeah, and we knew this. I mean, Maslow spoke about this. We are just going into the next level of our needs. I mean, it's very simple.
That's true.
That's true. And value that's where value lives, right?
That's true.
And what you are saying is just mapping on. It's not that we didn't know about it. We just didn't acknowledge it, like many other things, right?
That's true.
So let's then talk about this not having your top talent on your payroll and dealing with them as a new reality. I mean, it's not only top talent, it's practically any talent. I mean, today you go to a Fiverr or a Elance and you hire developers, you hire designers, you hire photographers and so on. You have spoken about some of those in your book as well.
Sure.
Both in context of remote work and otherwise. How will this impact how companies and leadership think about talent and managing talent and talent as part of their, their assets?
Yeah, so I think, as of now, when we think about, who will do this work, I mean, there is a sort of, again, it is that conditioning that you are necessarily thinking about the people who are there. So therefore, we get very surprised when one of them leaves, and we say, oh my God, look at that. I mean, we did so much for this guy and this person has left. Yet, if you look at your whole notion, I mean, these are the same companies which, advocate a free market when it comes to their products and services. They all want that there should be no restriction. We should be able to buy and sell where we want. When it comes to talent, nobody wants a free market. Everybody wants people to be on their payrolls. They are sort of there. They can't move, especially if you're worthwhile to them. Then you can't move anywhere, no matter what the opportunity. So I think that mindset of being able to view talent as somebody, it's a privilege that you're working with somebody today, is not something that we've had to really think about in a very serious way. But today, when you think about what has happened in the lockdown, work went from work from home, so WFH, and it sort of moved to work from hometown. H became hometown. And I'll give you the example of that. One of the guys told me, a young kid who lives in the neighborhood, I was chatting with him, and he said that, the biggest mistake I did was that I did not, at the time of the lockdown, most of my team members, they went off to their hometowns. And I, like an ass, decided to stay back in Bangalore. So what happens is every time there's a problem with the server, my boss will call me up and say, "You are like 15 minutes away. Why don't you just go down there and just fix it?" So I'm doing everybody's work at all odd hours of the day, besides doing my own work. And then what the guy did was, the first available opportunity was that, he said, there is going to be no train or plane flying. So he decided to take his car, got the permission, and just moved off. So he went and started operating. Now everybody's on level playing field. Nobody can come in at the odd hour, and people have to figure out how to do this. This model then moved to the next phase, which is work from anywhere. Now the question is, if I can work from, let's say Munnar, and you can work out of, some other place in West Bengal, and some third person, why not work out of Romania if I can do that? Which sort of, if you flip the argument on its head, it simply means that, like you said, that I can go on to a Fiverr or Upwork or, and just get people that I want for the task. The moment you are able to do this, talent becomes substitutable, and you sort of move it up in terms of expertise. You're no longer saying, I have a person whose proficiency level is, for argument's sake, 3 out of 10. Now I'm trying to figure out, what do I do with this guy? He's not motivated to learn new stuff. And how do I... You're simply going to turn that person around and say, I'm going to work with a gig worker. Except for the fact that we have always, and in my book, I sort of segregate this whole terms, gig worker, freelancer, and all that. They're gig artist as 3 different categories of skill blocks. Gig workers are people who are using a platform to get discovered. So the Uber driver who gets allocated to you, we don't really care about whether it is person A versus person B. That's a substitutability of the talent. Then you are better. If you don't have a personal brand, then you have to be on a platform. But the people who have personal brands, I mean, for example, if you if you have a complication and you want to find the best heart surgeon, that heart surgeon is not going to be on Fiverr or, whatever. You will find that person through word of mouth and say, who's the person who can save my life? You will find that person. If this person says, I can only see you at 3:00 in the morning, you will jolly well go and do that. So I think in the freelance world, there is a hierarchy of talent, and talent is far more important. Expertise is far more important. So therefore, the rules that apply to gig workers don't apply to, people who are freelancers. And the organizations, therefore, don't know how to deal with them. Hence, they are passed on to the purchase department, who are trying to sort of standardize the form and say, we know how to buy chairs and staplers. Now we also will buy freelancers. So that is the way organizations deal with it. But it is inevitable that your top talent is not on your payrolls. The best developer, no matter who you are, you could be the biggest company in the planet, but chances are that the biggest expert on that particular field is not on your payrolls. Could be on somebody else's payrolls, or could be a freelancer, or could be a gig worker, could be many. But probably you don't know that there's somebody who's really that great. So how do we discover that talent? I think is going to be a future problem that we'll need to solve in some shape or form.
It is also, in a way, if you think about it, de-unionizing, right? So it is not a collective bargaining, but the ability of the single person to be able to bargain the best for himself.
Yeah, for freelancers, I mean, yes, that's going to be there. But I also anticipate that this whole, distinction that we have, that let's say if I'm a freelancer, nobody pays for my healthcare. But, until I'm safe and vaccinated, and I have the ability to do that, my sort of walking across to your office is not going to sort of keep the rest of your team, safe. So I think that it's going to be it's only a question of time before healthcare and a sort of minimum level of social security comes in for the freelancers or gig workers. So this artificial division between, one set of people get all of it, and then the other gets none of it. I mean, it's going to eventually, nature abhors this kind of unequal distribution, So you will see that kind of, whether it is through unionization or legislation, it will happen. It has happened 100 years back. There is no reason why in a more connected world it's not going to happen. It'll probably happen faster. So you sort of look at the Tatas of the world. Talked about a certain number of hours, maternity benefit, all those things they brought in before the rest of the world had done it. So it is again going to happen. And this time it's just for a different group of people.
Finally, you made some distinction between the four groups that you talk of in the book: the dreamers, unicorns, market shapers, and incumbents. Let's talk about it a bit.
Yeah, so dreamers are really, people who are still trying to find the product market fit. They're trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. So that's the dreamer. This is also true for. So dreamer is not just about organizations, dreamers, unicorns, but it's just a way of sort of looking at wherever there is, a whole lot of curiosity. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to discover. You're trying to explore. That mindset is a dreamer mindset. And then you have the unicorn mindset, which is really all about scale. That you've solved a problem and you are really expanding on that particular problem, and you're just sort of simply scaling it up. You've done it in one city. Now you want to do it in 50 cities. Then you want to do it in 5,000 cities. So that is the unicorn mindset. It doesn't have much to do with the valuation, except for the fact that when you're probably in that kind of a state where you are operating across the entire country, you're potentially, at least in the case of a country like India, where it's a pretty large domestic market, chances are that you are a unicorn anyway in terms of valuation of $1 billion plus. When you become a market shaper, you are actually operating with all those 5 shifts that I talked about, that you are not only operating on the way you solved the problem which was existing, but you're also defining new marketplaces. You are combining different things. And there is really no one single definition of what do you do. I mean, for example, it's very hard to say what is the business that Apple is in. Is it, hardware? Is it software? Is it apps? Is it this? What is it? Is it in photography? Is it in creative communication? What is it? In the same way, you find it hard to describe Amazon in some shape or form. What is the problem Tesla is trying to solve? So these are market shapers. They are changing the way people live and work in whichever way. And most of the times, they are solving problems that we never believed globally could be solved, right? So those are the market shapers. There's a fourth category, which is that, of course, when you're a dreamer and nothing works out, you just simply die because you run out of funds and then you're gone. But when you're a unicorn, you have funds, you have all of that, except for the fact that one of the things that happens is when leadership, talent, and culture are not addressed, those 3 issues, you actually land up having a scenario where that unicorn will blow up. I mean, in the book, I do talk about Theranos and, all of that. There are many such examples where companies which have grown and they've been on the cover of Fortune magazine and everything. And we said, oh, my God, what is this? And then you realize it's been built on, a set of lies and frauds and all of that. And this has happened with, there are way too many names. And you and I, we all know of that. It's not just the unicorns. It's also in, companies which were market shapers at some point of time have become irrelevant. So they have now become incumbent. I debated for a long time whether I should start to use the word irrelevant, but I thought it was too harsh. So I toned it down and used the word incumbent, because incumbents have a sense of entitlement. They believe that the world owes them everything because they've been great at some point of time. In India, all you need to do is look at some of the family businesses that you can think of in the past, which were like really dominating, the commercial space at some point of time. They are not there. They become irrelevant. And this is the thing. And you will also see those signs. One of the first things that happens is they are unable to attract talent because, talent has a very strange way of picking up the early signs of rot. So, people will informally say that, oh, that's not a fun place to work. Oh, they treat you like this, that, and the other. And so so that's one of the places where that rot begins. So if you're unable to attract people, that's probably a warning bell. So I think those are those four categories. And as I said, that leadership, talent, and culture become your growth drivers.
Yeah. So where do you see this going from here?
I would, I really want to be able to take the ideas of the book and translate it into different languages. So, and I'm saying that, I'm working with somebody who's helping me translate this into Odia language. I want to work with people with the various regional languages of India. I want to take it to that and potentially just, even if it's not a word for word translation, an adaptation, if you will. I want to do that for the languages that I know, Hindi, Bengali. I would like to be able to do it myself, and then work with others who can take these ideas and make it accessible to people who are in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 about how careers are changing, how they should be looking at organizations, and if they are building organizations, what should they do about it so they don't collapse? Because this is where the next set of innovation is going to happen when the next billion goes online. You lead different kinds of organizations, and they shouldn't make the same mistakes that the previous generation has made. So how do you sort of do that? So I want to be able to take that to a much larger audience, and hopefully at some point of time I'll also get ambitious enough to take it to other languages outside of the Indian languages, and make sure that somebody can read this, get this idea in French, and somebody can get it in Romanian and Ukrainian, wherever. So that's a dream.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the chat, and all the best for the book. And I'm sure we will be talking again soon.
I can't wait for our next conversation. Thank you, Shubhanjan. This has been so lovely to have such a rich discussion. Thank you so much for having me. I'm deeply grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.